from the standpoint of academic achievement and graduation rates to approximate the outcomes of private education. That should be our goal, and that should be our reality. And there's no one on this planet that's going to convince me that those goals are not achievable with the attitude and the enthusiasm that is now being reflected in the partnership opportunities we're discovering here in Cleveland and Pittsburgh and other cities. Believe it or not, there now exists a group of superintendents and school boards that are listening with a keen ear to examples of excellence that may go beyond the status quo. I think you got one here in Cleveland. I certainly can tell you we have one in Pittsburgh, and we hope to create the opportunity for many, many more before this is over. I believe this is true because many of those districts are experiencing failure rates that are at third world levels. And in many of those cases, no one seems to notice or care. There are no emergency bulletins on the television news, no organized groups forming to insist on serious and immediate change. Regrettably, oftentimes, everyone sleeps soundly as if everything is all right. I would like to suggest that things are not all right. And I would predict that the net result of the collective negligence of our school system and its children will have significant and possibly catastrophic implications on our lives and on our country's future if something is not done immediately to arrest this problem. And my hope is that you sense in my voice an absolute urgency to get on with this, because if you do, you will be seeing exactly what I intended to do with this presentation. Communities that have dysfunctional schools are themselves ultimately dysfunctional. Companies become reluctant to move to communities whose schools are not up to par. Property values tend to stay below market because the investment climate is unstable and uncompromised. The psychological process of a negative self-image in the community creates an environment that becomes a cancer out of control. The good news, however, is that the conditions and circumstances that I have been describing are capable of remediation. Communities can have schools that work, that are cost-effective, that operate in an environment of promise and hope. The reason I know this is true, because I run a school like that in Pittsburgh, that we took clay and photography and digital imaging and used them as our strategy to rebuild the lives of kids who had been pushed aside in partnership with our school system. To this day, my work with the arts and those children continues with extraordinary success. In a recent poll, we counted 90% of our kids had gone on to college from a community-based arts program with children who were given up on as unable to learn or to perform or in all likelihood graduate from high school. Now, I'm not a PhD in education. I'm blessed, thanks to my mother, with something called common sense, which unfortunately happens to be in very short supply in our country right now. And I'm arguing for common sense and getting this thing back to where people live every day and presenting these ideas in language that people can understand and embrace. Bidwell, on the other hand, my vocational school that I inherited in 1972, was a, what we will say, modest program back in 1972. I didn't found Bidwell, I took it over. They had heard about this nutty artist up the street who thought he was Moses, and they said, "We hear you're Moses, would you take over Bidwell?" And back then I actually did think I was Moses. Could lead all the poor to the promised land and so forth. And so, not knowing any better, I took over Bidwell. What they neglected to mention is that the center owed $300,000 to the Internal Revenue Service. And it operated in a building with no windows and holes in the floor. My first official act was that I bought the paint and I bought the beer. and I instructed anyone who did not participate would not have a job when the painting was complete. I am pleased to say that I experienced 99% staff cooperation in this first act of reclamation. I had decided to take control of the circumstances and to not be defined by those circumstances. I had decided that we were going to become something and not experience the fate of similar programs in the past. At that center, I had the very unusual idea of going out and talking to employers about what they wanted before I started to teach it. It was a very revolutionary concept at the time, and one that I strongly suggest educators do. Because if you're not talking to the employment sector about what you're teaching, the likelihood is it's going to be a big-time disconnect, and your students aren't going to be prepared when you're finished with them. So I actually went out and asked the executive what they did in his operating plan, and he said, "You're the first educator that's ever been out here in 25 years to ask that question. We like your approach." It is called a common sense solution. Unfortunately, one that is very rarely adopted by educational institutions, both private and public. I challenge you to ask most educational administrators when they have sat down with employers and developed a joint curriculum. It does not happen. Not because the administrators are bad people, but because, unfortunately, we've had them doing more paperwork and filling out forms than allowing them to be educational leaders with which they signed up for to do the job in the first place. We don't encourage principals and superintendents to be innovative, and we don't certainly encourage them to be entrepreneurial. But I think that's exactly what they need to be encouraged to do, and I think you will be surprised to learn that most administrators, Cleveland included, would be thrilled at the opportunity to be able to participate in that kind of conversation. So in my view, I can understand why there's almost no relationship between what schools do and what the employers and the marketplace need. The solution to this dilemma does not require an advanced degree in education to accomplish. It requires initiative and a desire to do the right thing. It requires the community to support a school system that celebrates innovation, risk-taking, and the entrepreneurial spirit. By the way, the world used to define the United States of America in exactly those terms. I want my country back. Over the years, with this industry Bidwell partnership, our students were able to construct the cable system for the city of Pittsburgh. And in the process, we created 50 highly skilled technicians, many of whom remain leaders in the field of cable and information technology to this day. Our students literally built the cable system for Pittsburgh. It's still functioning. I turn on my cable, and I'm very thrilled to tell you I'm still getting the signals. And so we now know with absolute certainty that poor folks and people who have been left behind can do advanced technology in a short period of time and go to the market and prove that they have ability. So by using this cable model, I was able to form partnerships in medical technology, computer science, chemical technology, culinary arts, the travel industry, and the financial community. Today, Bidwell takes students who are oftentimes on public assistance and academically dysfunctional, and within 12 months, those students are capable of performing at a level beyond industry standards in the vast majority of cases. In some cases, these are students with high school diplomas, but often have no marketable skills to go with the diplomas. By creating an environment of hope, creating physical space that reflects the human imagination, and assembling teachers who live those convictions, we can train poor people to be successful in virtually any industry that we are given an opportunity to be part of. For example, in the case of the Bayer Corporation, a leading Pittsburgh applied technology company and world leader in chemical analysis and manufacturing, we have for over a 10-year period taken inner city, out-of-work, disadvantaged people and made them fully functioning and certified chemical lab technicians in 12 months flat, using logarithmic calculators as sure as I'm standing at this podium.